Welcome back to my Illustrated Myth series. I'll be painting a new witch or goddess every other week and telling you all about the myth behind the woman. This week I'm painting Sekhmet, and we're going to dive into a bit of Egyptian creation myth. Personally, I found it fascinating to learn where the myth comes from. The earliest bits of it can be found on shrines inside Tutankhamun's tomb, and then other parts were written on the walls of later pharaohs' tombs in the Valley of the Kings, like Seti, Ramses II, and Ramses III. All these parts put together make up the Book of the Heavenly Cow, which was apparently considered the earliest book ever for a long time. And now onto the myth. In the beginning, Adam-Ra was as timeless as the void out of which he created himself. But now, it had been thousands of years since he joined the humans to reign as their pharaoh. And his frailty was starting to show. Ra could tell that his subjects had noticed too. He could hear whispers of rebellion and plots of betrayal when they thought they were out of earshot. And Ra was furious. How dare they? He hadn't just created the humans. He'd made himself mortal just so he could rule his people as one of their own, understand their sorrows and fix their suffering. Too angry to think straight, Ra decided he needed some help. Up in the clouds above Egypt, the gods called an emergency meeting. Now, Ra might have been hesitant at first, but his children insisted there was really only one way to deal with this. The humans? They had to go. They'd been created by a tear from the eye of Ra. Now, the eye was going to destroy them all. Now, the eye of Ra to the Egyptians was a metaphor. It could come in different forms. This time, it showed up as the goddess Hathor. Normally a cow goddess, Hathor decides she needs a new look if she's going to decimate an entire population. As she descends back to Earth, her cow head fades to reveal a lion in its place. Sekhmet, the lioness, appears for the first time. Across the desert, Sekhmet wreaked havoc among the people. The blood from the dead would probably have stained the entire country red if Sekhmet hadn't greedily been drinking it up as she went. Ra's anger began to melt as he watched his beloved subjects torn from limb to limb, and he finally decided enough was enough. He called down to Sekhmet to come back up and rejoin the gods, and prepared himself to face the humans that survived. But if Sekhmet heard him, she didn't show it at all. Her rampage of violence continued without so much as a pause. Ra called again, but it was no use. Sekhmet was covered in blood, her vision gone red. There was no getting through to her. So Ra hatched a plan. Early in the morning hours, while Sekhmet slept, Ra willed into existence a very potent Egyptian beer and mixed it up with as much red ochre as the gods could find. Then they poured out the blood-red mixture into the field in front of Sekhmet and held their breath, waiting. As the dawn began to break, Sekhmet awoke to a wonderful sight. Blood everywhere. Delighted, she lapped it all up in one gulp, became very drunk very quickly, and promptly passed out. I imagine the hangover after all of that was enough to put her out of commission for a pretty long time. Long enough, at least, to calm down her violent tendencies. Luckily for the humans, the reign of terror was over. But Ra was still fed up from being pharaoh, so he decides to ride off into space on the back of the sky goddess Nut, who is transformed into a cow for this purpose. In his place, the gods and humans will have to figure out on their own what to do next. And that's mostly where the Book of the Heavenly Cow ends. It's a bit like the flood-type cleansing of the earth you see in other mythologies. But I like in this case that we just have a goddess who goes a bit too overboard. I also liked that apparently the ancient Egyptians would remind themselves of this tale by drinking ochre-tinted beer at a festival of Hathor every year. Thanks for watching another episode of Illustrated Miss. If you liked it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. And if you want to see videos before they hit YouTube and get a bunch of extra content, and vote on which mythological characters I paint, please check out my Patreon and consider becoming a backer. I'll leave the link in the description below, along with all of the materials I use to paint Sekhmet. Hope you guys have a wonderful week!